Thank you, everyone, for joining and welcome. We're 2 minutes in, so I think good to jump in and get started with this webinar. My name is Alejandro Diaz. I am part of Common Land, where I work as a landscape finance specialist. And I am also a part of the 1000 Landscapes team, specifically within the finance design team. I'll be your host today. Get us started before I pass it on for a lovely and very exciting panel discussion that I'm really looking forward to. First off, again, thank you so much. For joining. This is a second event within a 3-part webinar series on landscape finance hosted by 1000 Landscapes. This specifically is the Pathways to Thriving Landscapes. We had heard from you in the first session that you were very interested in learning about strategies on funding landscape partnerships specifically. So thank you for your contributions if you joined then, and welcome. Let's get started. Could we please go to the next slide, Shannon? Again, just a very quick recap on the series itself. 1000 Landscapes is really a space for practitioners working on integrated landscape management, and specifically this series, landscape finance, to convene actors, learn from each other, develop a community, and explore and grow together this space. We, as I mentioned, have been co-creating a learning agenda with all of you. Thank you for all of those who provided feedback, contributed to that. Again, the idea is for this to be your space for all of us to contribute and stimulate the field further. Just very briefly, please use the chat functionality in order to introduce yourselves. Great if you can start doing that already. We will also be sharing in the chat relevant materials and publications that you can refer to from the 1000 Landscapes partners and others. The Q&A function will be open throughout the webinar. Please use this function if you would like to ask questions from any of the panelists and speakers, and we'll be sure to come back to them. We also, before jumping in, please note we'll be going into breakout rooms after the panel discussion. So please stick around for that. It will be great to meet and also to network in smaller groups. And we will also synthesize those learnings, those discussions, put together a report and bring it back to all of you participants. So let's jump in. I will just quickly set the stage before jumping into the panel discussion. Shannon, could we go to the next slide, please? So before jumping into the panel, we just wanted to give a quick recap of what a landscape partnership is. Again, this session specifically is meant to discuss strategies around funding landscape partnerships. So what are those entities? So the landscape partnerships, the way that we speak of them, are locally grounded, multi-stakeholder partnerships that are bringing together multiple actors within a landscape to coordinate actions that are related to diverse activities, diverse sectors within a landscape or region or territory. And these comprise, the local communities, businesses, NGOs, government, really anyone who is interested and who has a voice and participates in landscape management, land management, and seascape management as well. The importance of locally grounded initiatives cannot be overstated, as well as making this a co-created process and developing a common vision with those landscape partnerships leading that effort. When we talk about a holistic landscape approach, that landscape partnership is essential to the process. They are the organization's landscape leaders who are bringing in the actors, coordinating the development of a vision, doing research and development, supporting specific projects as well, doing monitoring, and really being a voice for the landscape. And the focus of this discussion, again, is that point 3. How can we fund those landscape partnerships? Again, the engines that keep everything running. So we'll discuss a little bit of diverse examples, but in essence, it's having very flexible and long-term funding that can keep the lights on for those landscape partnerships themselves. We're not talking about additional project-specific funding, but ongoing grant funding, ideally, that is meant for the organizations themselves who are doing this coordination work. Can we please go to the next slide? So very briefly, again, I'm from an organization called Common Land. So Common Land was founded in 2013 by Willem Verwerda, together with IUCN, business schools, and private foundation. And since then, we have been implementing the 4 Returns framework, which is a practical approach to integrated, landscape management globally. Maybe we can go to the next slide, please. Common Land has been active for almost 10 years in several landscapes. This is where we are gathering a lot of these learnings and trying to implement and learn from local leaders on how they can go about the landscape restoration process. So in 2014, 2015, we started with several core landscapes. Those are ones that you see highlighted in Spain, the Netherlands, South Africa, Australia, and India. And we are now supporting landscapes throughout the world, globally, now in 21 countries. The focus of the organization remains the same: to implement and support the implementation of the 4 Returns framework and provide funding, provide support as technical assistance, and be a linking pin. So maybe we can go to the next slide, please, Shannon. To give you a little bit of an idea of our theory of change and our approach. So we work not with Common Land having boots on the ground ourselves, but everything is through local landscape partnerships. These landscape partnerships are really the organizations who are doing the groundwork and who are active in their communities, doing the work on the ground, developing a common vision with diverse stakeholders, doing the monitoring, the implementing projects, doing fundraising for the landscapes themselves. What Common Land is doing is, one, building a learning network of all of the different landscape partnerships that we are in touch with globally, and for them to be connecting with each other and coming together as a community. We are promoting the use of the 4 Returns framework and holistic approaches to landscape restoration. We provide funding. So on our approach, the way that we see landscape partnerships having to be funded is through ongoing long-term commitments that is largely unrestricted grant funding. Common Land uses multi-year grant agreements with its core landscapes in order to provide that foundation and consistency so that these landscape partnerships can do what they do best and actually implement and focus on the work on the landscape, having some security and a foundation of funding that is reliable in the long term. So our timelines really are 20 plus years permanence in order for that to be successful. And on the other hand, we're also supporting changing the system. So we're taking these learnings, aggregating them, being the linking pin, so that we can share these stories and promote the use of holistic landscape restoration, using a landscape approach, also globally. So we take a dual approach, both supporting within landscapes and impact for a systems change. So really that's it for me. Very excited to introduce the next component of this webinar. So I would like to introduce Jean-Louis Jordet, who will be moderating this very exciting panel. So over to you, Jean-Louis.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandro. Thank you for the overview. And hello, everybody. It's nice to see so many people, so many friends on this call. My name is Jean-Louis Robidet. I'm the founder of the Regenerative Development Group, the co-founder, I should say, with my partner, Temi Tallis, where our mission is to accelerate investments for nature, biodiversity, and sustainable landscapes. So I'm really thrilled to introduce this panel. And Alejandro, thank you for providing the overview of what we call in 1000 Landscapes, these landscape partnerships. So these organizations that are the linchpin of these landscape initiatives. And we have three wonderful representatives here of these landscape partnerships. So I'll briefly introduce them. And as Alejandro said, throughout this panel, we'll have about 30 minutes for this conversation, 30 to 40 minutes. We'll have a few questions for the panelists. Please feel free to enter your questions, comments in the chat or in the Q&A function. And then we'll have time for Q&A in the plenary. And then we will have some breakout, about 20, 25 minutes in a breakout where you will have the opportunity to connect and have a conversation about this topic. So the three panelists, so I'll start with Carl Brousseau. Hello, Carl. So Carl is the director of the Mount Mulanje Conservation Trust in the Mount Mulanje Biosphere Reserve in Malawi. Carl is a third generation Malawi. He came into conservation as a systems analyst, so a bright engineering mind applied to conservation. And he has dedicated himself for the past 20 years to the Mount Mulanje Conservation Trust, and so brings a really grounded experience from this quarter century. And Mount Mulanje, and I would encourage everybody to look on the map to discover this beautiful region. I should also add that all the panelists a few months ago prepared presentations about their context, their ecosystem, their landscape, and you can find those presentations on the website of 1000 Landscapes. And the Mount Mulanje Biosphere Reserve is a high, about 600 square kilometers. It's a high endemic biodiversity area, and it's also a highly vulnerable social context. So it presents a very, very interesting context and complex context for this work. Our second panelist is Paddy Ruiz Corzo. Hello, Paddy. And Paddy is the founder of the Grupo Ecológico Sierra Gorda, and she really co-created the Grupo Ecológico Sierra Gorda in the late 1980s, really as a wonderful vision of a protected area, of a conservation program at a landscape scale that would be led by and implemented by and benefit civil society and communities. So that has been at the heart of Paddy's work. And think about it, since 1987, I think, Paddy. So it's been a long and beautiful journey. And Paddy has some wonderful YouTube videos and TED Talks, and so I would really encourage everybody to discover her work. And so it really has been in continuous operation as a grassroots movement, but also a movement that is able to influence policy at jurisdictional level. It has been able to influence companies as well as governments and many, many other actors. And our third panelist is Hendrik Berman, who is a senior project manager with GIZ International Services based out of Tanzania. Hendrik is the project director of the Loudest Foundation funded Tanzania Regenerative Production Landscapes. Hendrik has implemented programs all over the world, really, in places like Sierra Leone, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and has worked with very large institutions such as the EU, the World Bank, and others that are enabling these landscape initiatives, and has been in Tanzania, I believe, for the past 7 years. Is that correct, Hendrik? Good. So welcome. Excited for this conversation. So I'll start with one question, and we'll do a little round robin. And I'll start with you, Carl. If you could speak of the genesis of the Landscape Initiative in your context of the Mount Mulanje Conservation Trust. You know, how did the idea came about? How did the organization came about? And because this conversation is about exploring funding pathways for these landscape partnerships, if you could also describe what made it possible from a funding perspective, who and what institutions were behind it at the beginning, and what has been the evolution of your model as MMCT.
Well, I'm glad I pressed the unmute button. So I'll try and be succinct. Thank you, Jean-Louis. Good to talk to you. Mount Mulanje is a special place. It's prominent and it's pretty and it's got lots of great biodiversity and it's got great hiking. So it attracts a diversity of people. Back in the 1980s, it was starting to suffer from lesser management, and people were getting rather concerned about the state of the mountain with regards fires, tree diseases, various other things. As we came into the 1990s, a few of those individuals talked to each other and decided to come together. I was the secretary of the working group that had its first meeting in 1991. Paddy beats me still, but and that was when I was with a different organization. And basically what happened was a few local residents around the mountain, one or two academics that loved to hike, a couple of conservation organizations that appreciated what a gem it was, and then Mountain Club, the Mountain Club that hiked a lot, got together. They had one or two meetings and decided it was worthwhile trying to do something. We have to remember this was a one-party state then, a lot of political kind of oppression. Civil society was kind of under pressure. But those people were diverse enough that they talked to other organizations that were interested, and they built up a stakeholder grouping. And that's reaching out to research institutions, to local authorities, government and traditional, and eventually to government to have the let's say that courage, because at that point that was an issue. What happened then was that government sort of responded to say, this is our issue. It's not for you to become involved. We see that you're meddling. And there was a confrontation there. It wasn't a conflict one, but it was enough that it was severe. But these stakeholders increased their stake in a sense. They increased their concern and they wanted to find a way through. That got noticed by some donors that were now trying to assist civil society express themselves. And very soon we had DFID, now FCDO, and the World Bank coming to talk to us. Now, you can imagine in those days to have organizations like that trying to talk to you is probably not the greatest thing because they're very bureaucratic. Anyway, cut a long story short, we spent about 4 or 5 years interacting with them and really trying to understand how they wanted to assist us. DFID did manage to have a project to assess and analyze the situation. And fairly soon after, World Bank came in to look at the possibilities of brokering a deal with government and this organization that was emerging itself to be called Mulanje Mountain Conservation Trust, with 20 stakeholders being represented on the board. So you can see it really was, one, a legal entity that could work with government or certainly balance other interests, constituencies, but secondly, broadly based in its representation. Very soon after that, fortunately, the World Bank managed to sign a tripartite agreement with them, and the GEF stepped in to see what they could do with a conservation trust fund, let's say, reward at the end of a project, and off we went. And that was our beginning. We recruited staff, and it was a bit like a torture tunnel test, working on a World Bank project from nowhere, but we did it. So that was our beginning. Thanks, Jean-Louis.
Thank you, Carl. Paddy, good morning. I think you're on mute. So Paddy, hi, thank you for being here. So I asked the same question of you, and it's interesting that you both have a long journey of over 3 decades, but in very different contexts, right? What we now call landscape partnerships didn't have a name, right? So this really came out of a vision, a mission, an intuition that you had. So Paddy, would you like to describe how Grupo Ecologico came about?
With pleasure. Hello, everybody. Grupo Ecologico began 36 years ago as a local actors, a small organization in Jalpan de Serra, that is a main town in Sierra Gorda, Querétaro State, central Mexico. 33% of the state was declared as a biosphere reserve in the 97. 10 years later, Grupo Ecológico Sierra Gorda was founded. So I came from an urban past. Yeah, and with those gifts and relations, we moved with my family, Roberto, that is from the region, well-rooted and co-founder of Grupo Ecológico Sierra Gorda. And we began this local NGO because the tremendous pressure of the 638 communities that live within the reserve, and they own 97% of the land. Then I want to do conservation in their lands. We bought the whole ticket. I knew since the beginning that we were going to weave a social strategy to give answers for the local communities. And since then, we have been weaving solutions. Yeah, we are really a nature-based solution operating project. We have thousands of kids that has been educated through an ecological program, very deep, strong, and in an energetic way. The kids, the teachers, everyone in the community, the authorities, cleaning, harvesting water, recycling materials, producing vegetables, healthy cafeterias in the schools, and eco clubs and parents committees, and everything you think that you may do to raise the wave, it's happening in Sierra Gorda. Every year we celebrate 60 festivals for Mother Earth, and you may touch the waves of love and territory appreciation of the local people. Thanks God, it worked. Yeah, after 36 years, we have well organized in segments, community tourism providers, forest owners that are receiving payments for the carbon capture. Yeah, and agriculture and fruit trees and orchids, hortalizas,
Orchards.
vegetable gardens in the homes. And we have a very strong training diploma course through the virtual education of Instituto Tecnológico de Monterrey, that is the best university in Mexico, well recognized, and we are training teachers. We began 2 years ago. We have now 420 teachers around the biosphere reserve, And I want to get every teacher, because they have been taking ecological lessons since they were in kinder by the ecological program of Grupo Ecológico. We really have put our biggest effort doing education, community education, and we have worked with love, singing. I came from a musician past. Then I began doing environmental education with my accordion in my shoulder, cleaning campaigns, giving healthy lessons, cooking with the ladies, doing the vegetable gardens, participating with them. There is no big science. It's common sense and a very generous heart, full of love. And love is a real material to weave. Emotions, to connect people again to the land, to feel responsibility. Oh, and I have a radio program, 36 years in continuous transmission that still has an audience. And now we have a theater, a play going everywhere in the community because we are harvesting our crops, our dams. We are really suffering the effects of climate change. So, environmental education and giving value to the carbon capture for the forest has been the biggest tool that we have followed since early 91. In 91, I was selling carbon credits in Berlin. Yeah, I am really an early adopter of the idea. But nowadays, we are paying to the forest owners. I have enough financing to pay every little piece of forest or planet grazing project in Sierra Gorda through a carbon payment that is a gentle and loving protocol that has been placed on the context of the landowners. Not those carbon credits, I am against them, really. It took me 30 years, but nowadays it's a reality, a public policy, a green public policy that is pushing for education and for, as I told you, all the programs that we have, and Sello Querétaro of low emission, Querétaro seal of low emission, that we have found as this financing fresh money for conservation and to be able to give answers to the landowners, because that's how we have so much love also from the communities, from them to here, because we have answers. Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's Grupo Ecológico. And we are working with different minds. I moved to Sierra Gorda to learn to live with little. I love simple life. I really enjoy the pleasures of simple life. Yeah. I found wealth in apples, in guavas, in mangoes, in my vegetable garden, in so many wonderful moments that I am spending with Mother Earth. Now I'm retired, I'm not traveling, but I came back to my forest. It's a sweet, calm, old forest. There's so much beautiness. There's so much peace and energy. So since then, through Zoom, I am really an spider trying to raise a wave of love for Mother Earth. I adore my planet.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I'm not the one.
No.
That's why I came to Sierra Gorda 40 years ago, looking for different answers. And I think that we are just in the time to take the pot and crush it to the floor and to build a new world with different values of love, of abundance, we move lots of money to the local communities. Yeah. I write proposals. I am a word processor, and I am really fast and sharp through Zoom, doing meetings and pushing this because I have to substitute all the absences, the institutional absences that we are suffering in Mexico. Yeah, the normativity, the garbage, the water treatment. Then I'm pushing all my friends in Querétaro City, all the functionaries, the secretaries to.
Yeah.
I must stop there. I have many stories. It has been a pleasure.
No, it's beautiful, Patty. Thank you for sharing your story, and I've been fortunate to be in a number of conversations with you, and it's just beautiful what you're doing and what you've done with throughout your life. And when you speak of love, in finance, there are many ways to finance things, and one of them is philanthropy. And I don't know how many people know that the etymological root of philanthropy is love of humanity, right? So the root of the intention, the purpose of philanthropy is supposed to be an act of love for humanity, and by humanity, the whole planet, but including all species. And maybe we can speak to that a little bit later. Is philanthropy truly demonstrating that, and how, in the context of the beautiful landscape initiatives that you're all leading? And I think it's a good segue, Henrik, for you, because you are working with one such philanthropy, right? The Laudes Foundation, which has demonstrated a commitment to these kinds of programs. You're also in a different role because you support landscape initiatives, right? So you help to catalyze and develop and grow. So I wonder if you could speak to the regenerative landscapes in Tanzania specifically, the genesis, and how on the funder side, what has happened, right? Because funding is such an important part, where a funder, in this case, the Laudes Foundation, saw the opportunity to do it and has now been supporting it for a number of years.
Yeah, thank you to Jean-Louis. And first of all, I have to say a lot of admiration, Patty and Carl. I hope that I can be here in another series of this event in 20 years and speak about all the achievements that I have reached in that time. But so we are still much further in the beginning compared to both of you. We actually started 6 years ago with funding of the Laudes Foundation. We are working in the regions of Singida and Simiyu in Tanzania. That is cotton growing, semi-arid cotton growing areas, pretty hard hit by climate change, deforestation rates among the worst in the world. And obviously, mostly subsistence agriculture. And we started as an organic cotton program. The Laudes Foundation, previously known as C&A Foundation, was working a lot on the textile value chains and organic cotton around the world. So we started working with cotton companies, ginners, that had extension services that were training farmers. One of them was already working on organic and just doing organic. The other one was pretty large in conventional and wanted to convert to organic. So we started working with them. I think in 2017, we had around 7,000 smallholder farmers that we reached through these ginners. By now, we are at more than 60,000 organic certified smallholder farmers. And Tanzania is the 5th largest organic cotton producer in the world. So that has been quite a journey. But within that, you work with farmers and you train farmers on organic. Nowadays, the term is regenerative, but ultimately what we mean with organic is the same, or agroecology. But you also see that there are a lot of issues beyond the field of the farmers. There is unsustainable land use practices, deforestation, overgrazing. There are a lot of livestock herds roaming around in those areas, erosion, loss of biodiversity. I mean, I guess all of you anyways know these issues. So those are rather issues you have to solve at a collective level. And that's where already during this organic cotton program, we started working with communities. And luckily in Tanzania, part of the socialist history, I guess, there are at the grassroots level official committees. So in every village, you would find a village environmental committee working well or not well. Depends. But we started working with these committees. And I mean, there's no word for climate change in Swahili, but the people understand what is happening. And with a bit of facilitation, they are able to find solutions as well. So now we're working with these committees and trying to bring that up into district level planning. So there are district environmental action plans in Tanzania. Every district should have that. No district had it. So we started working on that. And, you know, out of that, kind of organically, out of an organic cotton program, became, this alliance grew based on the same recognition that there is no sustainable economic future in those regions as well. Most of it, as I said, is subsistence agriculture. If you're looking at sustainable way of producing, it's mostly cotton as a cash crop, but these farmers grow a lot otherwise. So that's how now this landscape partnership was formed. We're not yet a legal entity or anything big on paper, but I think we are a number of actors that all share the same vision. There are a few NGOs as well working on agroforestry approaches. We're having a company we're talking to that has a biochar model that we try to replicate there. Another NGO that works on landscape restoration techniques like farmer-managed natural regeneration, this methodology that came from Tony Rinaldo, and other techniques. So this is all something that is happening that now ultimately, I think, if coordinated well, brings enormous synergies. You know, if there's landscape restoration going on in some parts of the landscape, but we, for example, are doing biodiversity assessments to see where do we actually still have biodiversity hotspots and pockets left in this landscape, and we're talking 70,000 square kilometers. Then it makes sense to coordinate what NGOs are doing and possibly bring that into district level spatial planning. So have a whole coordinated setup, and then ultimately the goal, I might be talking later about that a little bit, to make that fundable as well from the outside. So that in a nutshell is our short story from here.
Great, thank you. Well, I think out of these three very different stories, and some I knew better than others, Carl and Patty, and know your story better than I knew yours, Henrik. But what's emerging is just the importance of that foundation, right? That foundation, and of course, the landscape is the ecological, social, cultural foundation, and then the landscape partnership as an institutional foundation for this work. And projects, you know, what we're used to thinking of projects or enterprises or initiatives, whether it's a commercial entity, whether it's a nonprofit entity, whether it's a community-based initiative, are really, really important, of course, because that's what the action is. And that's what typically we tend to see, right? That's why we get excited. We don't get excited because a bunch of people are talking in a conference room or around or in a meadow, right? We get excited because, or most people, because of what comes out of that, right? All these beautiful initiatives. And the landscape partnership is the enabler of all that, all right? And from a funding perspective, we know, many of us who've been in this space for a long time, and I know how hard it is to show the value, demonstrate the value and the impact of having that foundation, because it's often, let's face it, invisible, right? It's the work of the soil, right? It's the underground work that makes possible the emergence of a thriving landscape, but it's often either taken for granted that it happens. Oh yeah, it's a bunch of people talking. Of course they have to talk, right? Or it's not understood at all, right? Because we see the tree, we don't see the roots. So I wonder if you could describe two things, really, in focusing on the funding aspect, because it is, you know, the topic for this webinar, really exploring how we finance landscape initiatives. One, how do you demonstrate the value? Do you have to demonstrate the value of this work, the impact, the importance of this partnership weaving work? And then from a funding perspective, where are you now? Are you able, so to speak, to monetize that value to support you doing this work? And what do you hope for the future? What do you need to better support your work? And I wonder, Carl, if we could start with you.
Okay, thank you. You're coming through a little bit blurred, but I'll try and talk to it. So, I mean, ostensibly, we were established with the perfect financing future. We were in a World Bank project for a few years and then awarded a conservation trust fund. That came from the Global Environment Facility, though. We had concurrently at the same time, and I point to what Patty was talking about, we also developed up our biosphere reserve status and became one of Africa's first global biosphere reserves around 2000. Now that is an interesting process, and I'm sure Patty could probably talk to this a lot too, but it gives you that holistic understanding that a protected area is not going to take care of ecology and biodiversity by itself, that we have to bring in humanity and we have to bring in the local landscape actors, much in the way in which we see has been done in Tanzania, despite there not having been any legal arrangement placed there. Whichever way around it goes, I don't think it really matters. I think there's probably a magic algorithm that does exist. But so we understood very early that the biosphere gave us a platform to work on that meant that many others around us had to be involved in what we did. But we had a conservation trust fund from the GEF that, as you know, funds for incremental costs. In other words, it had an assumption that the protected area, the forest reserve, managed by government, was effective, ongoing, well-financed, etc. And the incremental cost was to get us to assist them to reach above managing a forest, to add the cost of conservation of the unique biodiversity. And we saw that there was nothing really within the government mandated agency to get them to be able to do their job properly because their finance was so low. So we had a crisis situation almost immediately that we couldn't finance incremental cost when there was no finance coming into the system at all from government, or very little. We were literally spending more in a day than they were receiving in a year. We had the biosphere reserve thinking, and then all of a sudden we realized that in fact this wasn't all of a sudden, but we needed to reach out and create a social contract if we were going to have something workable in this biosphere reserve. So we then started writing proposals. We had a strong background, but we had very little in the way of analysis, data to present. It was more, in a sense, what you read behind Patty's work, trying to pull together all the potential initiatives on the ground, see where you can pick up the win-wins, see where you can find cooperation, partnership, and build on that. Find the positive relationships and build on that in a way in which you could connect with many people and build a system. Yes, we had some finance so that could take care of basic administration costs at most, but we used that to leverage donor money. So we often stepped out to get concessionary finance, and we did projects financed by the EC, USAID, Norwegian government of substantial size. And we used that money in the best way that we could to build those partnerships and opportunities. Often looking to catalyze or to build up capacity of community groups to do something that they could to improve their livelihoods, but find the win-win where there was a conservation benefit for the mountain, or at least within the environment around them. So that has often been the way we've moved forward, is to say, we're prepared to work together with X, Y, and Z organizations, A, B, and C communities, and we need some finance and some technical support to do this, to come up with an outcome. It's got a sustainable way forward. It's based on this and this thinking, and this is the exit strategy. And slowly, over the past 10, 15 years, that exit strategy has been based around the involvement of green commerce. So we saw that just trying to operate with concessionary finance was not going to provide a sustainable future. So often looking to base our activities on community livelihoods, or to bring in a company with a relatively green agenda, or to establish a social enterprise ourselves, or more special purpose vehicles with other finance houses, etc. So that's how it's been a journey, and I think a lot of us get to realize what works and doesn't work. But if you really are going to work with the people to the scale that we are, and in Tanzania at 70,000 square kilometers, our biosphere is only 1,000 in its entire size, but we have more than 500,000 people living inside there. So the population density is incredibly high. It's as high as Rwanda, but they have a year-round rainy season. We only have a single rainy season, and we're climate impacted horribly. So we've taken the most of every opportunity, reached out wherever we could find assistance, and built on that in a way to find a sustainable future.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. And I apologize for the lag on my end. We're having some big storms here in Seattle where I am. So the first storms of the fall, speaking of rain. Paddy, I wonder if you could speak to your situation. So from a funding perspective for the Grupo Ecologico Sierra Gorda, where are you today, and what do you hope to see in the future to support your work and the work of the many people, communities, and entrepreneurs in the landscape? I think you're on mute, Paddy.
I'm still begging. After 36 years, I'm still begging. I was not born in a rich cradle. No. We are a grassroots organization that asks for our personal generosity, our savings, and from other collaborators, and lots of writing proposals. It's like buying a rifle. Whew. My head is a word processor. Yeah. Every weekend since 34 years ago, I have, because I have. We operate a jet full-size project for 8 years in Sierra Gorda Biosphere Reserve. With that money, we implemented our first management program. Okay, and it was since then a framework that has led, the growing of the region. But from that point, and since the beginning up to now, we move in mountains of faith. Believe me, with no money for the salaries. We are 65 people, 17 trucks going everywhere. Taxes, Social Security. With my total and all the core mind that we are, my husband, my colleagues, my sons, we are a very committed and powerful group. We are proving our spiritual forces. Faith, we are champions. Believe me, the Providence is in my board of directors with no money, and we got a check just for the salaries from a telethon that Will de Gansen in Amsterdam made for us. We didn't have any idea, but we received a check the day before the salaries. And that's the way we have worked. From one jump to the next. Under a very strong harassment campaign from the federal fiscal people and this federal government. It's against civil society, Then it really asks for your resistance and your creativity and your capacity to connect, every possibility, as you say, Carl, I have many friends that are functionaries in high positions, the governors of the state from one to the next. And that's why Providence worked with us. And that's why we have been able to move from a Kyoto Protocol. We were the first project in the planet that was validated by BCS and CCB standards with Rainforest Alliance, and we got the gold standard in the year 2011. Woo! And I say, don't come with press. I'm so mad. I went through that labyrinth, so expensive, trying to fit in a size 7, where the landowners of the forest were taken in count. And since 91 up to now, it has been such a long learning curve. And to have the strength to have right nowadays a validated friendly protocol in the local context that gives the strength to the subnational government of Querétaro to law this seal, Querétaro Seal of Low Emission, where the corporates of the state, the biggest ones, have to or pay a new tax, carbon tax, or compensate the emissions with the landowners of Sierra Gorda, with a very low cost of the project development, and the money gets to the landowners. Just the 5% of the money is saved for administrative and operational coordination in camp, on field. The rest of the money goes to the communities with a very low cost of this project development. And it's the only protocol that is using the government of the state to work within our state. And soon we expect to have more money or what we could spend within the borders of the state. Because the demand that is raising, it will allow us to go to 4 more states around us in the same Sierra Gorda bioregion. Subnational public climate public policies at subnational level. We have this opportunity for this new financing resource. Really, We analyzed the carbon taxes opportunities in 5 different states in Mexico. There are many little things that are on the rule. Yeah. And the Querétaro government, we approach with them when we have a NAMA registered in USCCC for restoring of landscapes, planet grazing, and excluding the cattle from the forest, and just let the nature act. Very exciting. Not planting trees. Let the nature regenerate herself. We planted 6 million trees. It took us 25 years in our lives to the forest communities. You cannot imagine in a donkey with a wire, with the trees. For 25 years, 6 million trees. And in the year 2014, we have a bark beetle plague attack, and we lost the half of them. My God, those are where sealed with the gold standard by rainforest. Such a learning curve that just because I am a wild boar, I am more stubborn than a wild boar. It took me 30 years, but now we have a loving protocol validated externally. We were chosen by United Nations Environment to develop 5 ICAT guides, Initiative for Carbon Action Transparency. And we developed this facilitated methodology to monitor carbon. Yeah, more trustable than any satellite or LIDAR or whatever that goes above the forest and may not measure all the natural regeneration. God, our monitoring plots work really well. And we developed the planet grazing protocol for agricultural practices, livestock practices, and this exclusion of cattle from the old forest. And we have now 25,000 hectares under these payments, and we plan to have 40,000 hectares in the next year and a half. And I never thought I was going to have billions of pesos to pay to my friends. Finally, I love them. Those forest owners, they are people from the forest. Yeah, and they love the resources. And now that they have an opportunity of not log the trees to make so few money and with so much impact, they are very happy to exclude their hands and to let regeneration grow. Then I'm very excited and thankful for life that has let us ground this dream to operate under a friendly protocol that is ready to replicate, to be replicated. It was a global protocol that was validated in Sierra Gorda, but we have 5 ICAT guides to share. Yeah, and it's for any subnational answer initiative. It may be from the municipalities or it may be from the state government. And is there, and we know how to keep all this action in a very traceable and clear way. We have developed very specialized platforms. We are working with Open Forest, yeah, to have this transparency, with Salesforce to have all this transparency. And we will be in Explorerland at the visibility of every corporate that buys any carbon reduction. So we are very sophisticated and a very grounded NGO developing answers. Also, the diploma training course for teachers or any local entrepreneurs is in a virtual campus. Then it may be replicated in any Latin country. And it's really a ticket with no return. It puts teachers to act and to connect from the school to the homes, to the fires, and to the authorities, and put everyone to act to release pressure to the territory that we all love. Sorry to talk so
No,
much.
beautiful. Oh, please don't This is amazing. Thank you for sharing this story. Hendrik, do you want to speak to your context in terms of where you are and kind of where you see your program going?
Yes, I will try to be slightly as passionate as Patty, but I'm a German, sorry. So yeah, I said we started with the 6-year 2 phases of organic cotton program funded by Laudes Foundation, and we're still funded by Laudes Foundation. You mentioned philanthropic funding, and it's a comfortable position to have that. With them, we now transition to this new program, which is called the Regenerative Production Landscape. So with their strategic shift, I mean, I said under organic cotton, we already started with a few kind of landscape elements in terms of working with communities and up to district governments and coordinating work of NGOs. But there was a strategic shift by Laudes Foundation as well to go away from a single commodity focus. And in the case of organic, also from a single commodity certification focus, more towards something that some might call a verified sourcing area, or something where you look at kind of offering companies that source agricultural goods to source them sustainably from a whole landscape. And I mean, that means a whole M&E system around that, basically, but going away from farmer X is organic certified and farmer B is this certified kind of an approach. So that is the approach we are taking with them, and we're also trying to now position, as we're kind of still a cotton landscape. I know a landscape is not based on a single agricultural good, but cotton is still a major cash crop here. We're trying to position this as well for textile industry, for brands that are sourcing sustainable cotton, to be involved. And there are a number of large international textile companies that are active down in the supply chain. They might not communicate it as much in terms of longer term agreements or offtake agreements or partnerships. On the one hand, to guarantee that the demand side kind of is working, and that then guarantees also the support to farmers, but also to even financially support the outreach to smallholder farmers. I mentioned we're now looking at more than 60,000 smallholder farmers, so you can imagine the resources that go into this. But ultimately, the farmers are the guardians of the landscape, and though in a way limited to the field, but they are also part of the communities. And I think the more they understand the type of regenerative mindset, the more you also get that into communities. But there, for example, is another case for financing that is not directly landscape financing in terms of a facilitation perspective, but simple funding for farmers. So there we are looking at crop insurance, loan schemes. We have some farmers that borrow money in their village for 100% interest rate. Can you imagine? And these are like still smallholder farmers, but they are entrepreneurs as well. And there you see it's very difficult, obviously, for such a farmer to do something. But if they are part of a larger thing, a larger landscape, that also means they are part of offtake agreements with companies. That means they are part of a data set. It sounds very stupid and simple here, but if they are part of a data set, a bank might believe them, and create a different loan product for them. So that's I think a big part. Apart from that, I mean, our core funding is definitely not enough. I'm not here to beg for more funding, but I can share that sentiment definitely with Carl and Patty. And it's a never-ending struggle. And I think especially if you start talking about landscapes, what are you actually talking about? If you talk about the typical old development project is very much straightforward. You have a log frame, you have these goals to achieve, and these are the activities, and that's it. But a landscape is something so much more loose. So I always see it as an M&E system as well, because ultimately an M&E system is really what happens in a landscape and the project, the progress in the landscape. And that's where we now try to integrate all the different elements from, companies that aggregate, companies that provide bio inputs, biochar to farmers, but also landscape restoration, agroforestry approaches. And this is, I mean, I would love to learn from you, Patty, from carbon. The carbon angle is so often discussed, but, and I had to learn that myself as well. In semi-arid areas, there's not a lot of money for carbon. Carbon is where you have a lot of biomass growing. Unfortunately, because I guess in a semi-arid area hit by high deforestation rates, that's actually where you need it. So these things also only work when you have scale, and you have scale when you look at a landscape partnership and at an entity coordinating something, and not one small district in one region in Tanzania trying to do something like that, but to create the system around for several districts. And ultimately, I think the vision is to get to something where we can create a type of a fund. I also like to talk about landscape bonds, but that's far away. I heard, Carl, you might be going in that direction a little bit. It's a big thing, but some type of a fund that can incentivize action within communities, up to district level as well. But there's a lot, and communities are ready to do something, but ultimately it's really difficult to fund. And I participated in a number of landscape finance events, and Loudest Foundation held one as well, together with 1000 Landscapes and Climate Kick and other partners. And this is really good, but often you hear about there's all the funding available that you need, for bankable projects in your landscape, and blended finance, and debt and equity investment into companies. And the money is already on the table, funding pockets of $500,000 to $2 million. Those are the smaller ones. And then equity investment, 5 million and above. And I see that in a number of landscapes that Common Land, for example, runs. It absolutely makes sense. If I look at our landscape, the 4 cotton companies we're working with, they might be able to absorb the lower side of that. But if I look at the real businesses in the landscape that we want to support, it's actually much smaller sizes, So I think to activate that type of funding that can support those businesses in the landscape that are conducive to a sustainable landscape, and then funding to incentivize actions, even if it's just subsidies to something that districts implement, to then attract government funding to go in the right direction. I think, those are the things that we are looking at the moment. But ultimately, I think, and probably all the landscapes will say, that grant funding is still a large part, because no one looks at communal land. We can always find a business case on the field of a farmer, but communal land that needs to be restored, you might have a tourism angle or something like that, or the carbon credits, but it's really difficult to get funding for restoration of communal land. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Henrik. So these are such rich insights. So just a time check for this call, and thank you all for being on this call, for staying on this call. So we had planned breakouts. The panel lasted longer, but I think given the insights and just the incredible stories from these landscapes, there's so much content. So what I would suggest, and here I'll turn to Shannon and Juan and Alejandro, is that we pause this conversation here. And I really want to thank you, Carl, Henrik, Patty, for these insights. We've barely scratched the surface. So let me just acknowledge that, but you already surfaced so many opportunities and so many challenges. And this is not the end of it, even for this series, right? We have another event planned in about a month. And this is a community that we're building together to explore and inquire into these questions. So I'll turn to Ale and Shannon, because we have about 20 minutes left for the time that we had scheduled. I think it's still worth maybe giving some room for the breakouts, kind of letting people relax a little bit, just, have a side conversation, which will be way too short, and then we can come back here. That would be my suggestion.
But maybe before wrapping up, we can just give the moderators very quickly, if you want to jump in for a minute or so with a quick summary, if that's possible, of your breakout rooms. Is there anyone who wants to jump in?
I'll start. Hello, Ali. I had a wonderful group. Thank you so much, Harriet, Sophie, and Kristen. There's a couple aspects which was spoken about. One, which is the recognition that landscape partnerships, exist in all sorts of different guises, and more often than not, they're not the perfect example that we aspire to, and that's okay. I think Kristen from CI really related to that. And then we talked about the funders in the different landscapes that everybody was there with. And actually there was a lot of interest, work with grantors, private funders, etc. But the biggest issue is about getting long-term finance, because, a lot of these projects was to be transformational, you need 20 years, but there isn't the funding to match that. So a lot of busy work has been done to collect the grants and private finance. And the issue with private finance, and our panel dealt with corporates who are often looking for sourcing, but they're also dealing with the CRI departments who are not necessarily as strategic as they probably need to be. So they're not thinking about locking down funding for sourcing for 20 years, which would be perfect for funding, right? It's very much on a short-term basis. So I think the conclusion is that, we get moving in the right direction, but there's still a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tammy. No one size fits all, long-term perspectives. Would other moderators who would want to jump in?
Let's say Alejandro, this is Seth Seamus. Also, it was great just to meet the other people in the group. So Rob, Roland, Jesse, Nicole, Donato. A similar point to Tammy, I'll just say like one sentence, which is the diversity of context, very wide diversity of contexts in which these initiatives are happening. And so there's the challenge figuring out the context, the kind of the groupings that are relevant to each other. So whether that's geographic or based on value chain, that I think there are potential ways to kind of institutionalize solutions, but there of course won't be like a one size fit all. So there's a challenge there. Thanks. And thank you so much to the speakers, by the way. That was a fascinating session.
Thank you. Thank you, Seth. Jean-Louis?
Yeah, I think in our group, Carl was there and 2 or 3 other people. And I just want to mention one comment someone made at the end, or the conversation that happened at the end around care and love and understanding of the landscape, right? Of the whole landscape, of the ecology, of the culture, of the people, of the community, and the importance of that connection, which goes beyond metrics and impacts and the hard stuff, right? What is the role of the soft in all this. And so I thought it was a very nice comment at the end. Thank you.
Common point in our breakout as well. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks, Alejandro. It was wonderful to work with you, Brad, Jesse, and Corinne. I think just to share one thought, we all sort of expressed our admiration for the presenters and all the work they've done over such a long period of time. And our discussion touched on a lot of things related to that time frame, like how we work over that long of a time, how we get funding in alignment with the time, how we look for funding that's most efficient to what we need to move forward quickly. And also sort of the nature of the people that have to be involved in the partnership. Clearly the presenters were super charismatic and compelling, and that role plus many others we talked about to try to put these things together and make them stand. But thanks, and thanks from our group to the presenters as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aaron. Karishma?
Thanks, Alejandro. Very similar comments coming up in our group. We had Viju, Rosa, Laura, and Alicia. There was an appreciation also for the Thousand Landscapes teams for pulling this together and just the gap that exists in the ecosystem overall to understand how landscape partnerships function. So that was one. What I also heard is that while the context, the socioeconomic context varies from one landscape to the other, what is not given a lot of importance is, especially when it comes to landscape financing at a large scale, is just the scale, as the spatial scale aspect of it. There could be smaller projects which may not fully fit in the scope and the scale of large scale financing, and therefore how do you curate financing to be able to support those smaller projects as well. And more opportunities to be able to understand convergence is what I heard in the group.
Thank you so much, Karishma. Very valuable contributions from everyone. Again, thank you so much for participating. See some raised hands. Patty?
Sorry, I have to run.
Yes.
But before I leave, I want to tell you that I feel very happy and proud to have you participated with so many fighters for the planet. Everyone is a drop from that big wave that we have to raise. And if you allow me, Alejandro, I'm going to sing a song. Yep. We are living in the great big deeper. We are washed by the very same rain. We all swim into the stream together. Some in power, some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the things that we leave beside. Loving spirits would live forever, with us swimming to the other side. Then let it flow.
Thank you, everyone. We'll close it at that. No better closing. So thank you so much, Patty, and everyone. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody.